parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are...
Hello, welcome back to the course in Values and Spirituality. It's great to have all of you back with us. Today we will be looking at page 18 of book number 2, and we're looking at the introduction and requirements for developing spirituality and values. Sister Denise, the first part that caught my attention is the following. Education in values and spirituality is time-honored. There are many courses and much literature has been written on the subject. The challenge lies in the fact that the levels and qualities of values and spirituality in our lives are not improving. Why not? What is the problem?
This is really the big question that arose in my mind when I was asked to write these books. Because so many books are there, and none of them work. One more book, is it going to work? Should I be doing this? So I really questioned it. And the people who asked me said, no, you have to do this. So I said, okay, well, if I have to do this, then I need to spend some time to figure out why it doesn't work. And the people who talk to us about values are moral philosophers, the religionists, educationists. Many different groups are doing this, and what we're seeing is there's no improvement. So I had to really look deeply and see, is there anything that I have access to that the other people don't have access to? Number one. Number two, can I analyze these in such a way that I can see exactly why it doesn't work? And then propose something and investigate whether it does or doesn't work. And I did all of this preparatory analysis, and I also did a lot of experimentation on different groups of people to find out whether or not it works. And I found that there was a discernible difference. So let me talk a little bit about what makes it not work and what makes it work. Values are taught using should, have to, must, ought.
Sister Denise, I want to stop you right there because I now have formulated another question based on what you say further on in the book. You go on to say, it is therefore important to discover and gain access to more effective methods of values development. This unit proposes new ways to develop ethical values and spirituality. This brings me to my next question. In what way is this new, and what makes this series of books different from all other courses and values that have been taught in the past?
There are these two strands. One of them says that the elders, the external moral authorities, are capable, and their function is to impart that and imprint it on younger people, and that this will make the younger people value-based. So this has been done for generation after generation for hundreds of years, but we have found that although it is believed that this will happen, the evidence shows that it doesn't happen, it hasn't happened, and it's unlikely to happen. So therefore it means we have to question the efficacy of external moral authorities. Now what we find is every human being is a mixture of good and bad. So if you have a mix of good and bad, which you then apply to the next generation, saying that this mix of good and bad is actually good. Then the next generation, which is also a mixture of good and bad, takes the previous mixture of good and bad, said to be good, mixes into that good and bad. It becomes more bad, you see.
Okay.
It doesn't work for that reason. Then the other thing is that the ideas of transmitting moral values are made up by people who just think, well, this will probably work. And now we have to face the fact that maybe probably it might work, but actually it doesn't work. So then when you challenge the assumption that these things work with the evidence that they haven't worked, it's very destabilizing for the older generation. Then you say, okay, why doesn't it work? It doesn't work because the people are spiritually getting progressively depleted.
You say in your next line, when values are cultivated together with spirituality and when methods of meditation are integrated into the process, the seeds of knowledge about values fall in the fertile ground of a nourished consciousness. I read that about 3 times because I was caught up in the poetry of the words. Tell us more.
Well, this is the important expression, a nourished consciousness.
Yeah, that sounds rather beautiful, I must say.
And you nourish your consciousness from a source which is divine. So meditation is the word that refers to your direct connection to the divine. And when you have a direct connection to the divine, you're drawing into yourself the material out of which values are developed. Unless you do that, the values of the previous generation, when transmitted to the next generation, are less powerful. And consequently, the opposition to values is free to operate with less resistance. And so one of the new aspects of this is to say that you cannot develop values just by being told what they are. That doesn't work at all. First of all, you have to agree that you do also hold those values as values. And second of all, you need to know how to build your own personal power, because the reason why people do actions that are considered to be lacking in values is not actually that they're lacking in values, they're actually lacking in power. And you find that people already know this stuff.
Oh, sorry, what stuff are you referring to?
Well, people learn in their homes from their parents about right and wrong, good and bad, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go to school, they learn the same thing again from their teachers. And then in their contact with their religious leaders, they hear it all over again. So they know it. It's not that they don't know it, but they don't have the power to live it.
Yes, that brings me on to the next question, which is contained in paragraph 2. You ask, why should values and spirituality be developed together? I think that's the question that we're about to go into. And what new methods and techniques are available? I'm curious as to why you say it's new. Okay, but I'll wait for your answer after I ask you this question. What difference does your state of consciousness make to your power to develop values and spirituality? That's the crux of today's episode, isn't it?
We talk about materialistic consciousness, spiritual consciousness, intellectual consciousness. There's various different words that are put together with consciousness. And the thing that, or the word that I use a lot for this is that when your consciousness is depleted, you don't have power. That means you're not clear. That means that your willpower is weakened. That means that your mind is much more out of your control, much more pulled by sense perceptions coming through your sense organs, and you're living in a much more chaotic condition. And so generally people will say, I know, but. Or sometimes people will say, well, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Ah, yes, we're all familiar with that one, aren't we?
Well, what does that mean? It means the materialism is the thing that causes you to be in a state of consciousness that renders your value system ineffective. And you say, well, I would if I could, but I can't. And all of these expressions mean I don't have power. So there's no point learning about values unless you're getting power. And all of the systems that we have had so far just tell people you should do this and you shouldn't do that, but they never say anything about how you get power. And so where do you get power from and how do you get that power? All of that comes under spiritual practice.
You go on to say, it is symbiotic. When spirituality is developed, values emerge, and when values are developed, they increase spirituality. That's beautiful.
Yeah, they really have to go together. And if you are trying to learn about values, but you don't develop your spirituality, you'll give up because you'll say, this is not working. And this is the thing, people thought that, well, the courses are bad, we have to make a better one. It's not that. The course is fine. But no one addressed the question of spiritual depletion. And part of that is because people believe in progress. And they think that just because you got born, you're progressing. Now, if you compare spiritual potency to the physical world, energy that comes into motion gets used and diminished. In the same way, the energy of the spirit comes into action and that energy is getting depleted. So unless you are feeding the spirit with energy, you're getting more and more weak. And it's not that people are bad per se, but the actions that people do reflect that they are morally, spiritually, ethically weak. And so you don't punish somebody for being weak and expect that to make them strong. But that's what the usual system does. You just say that, well, you can punish somebody because they're bad and that will make them good, which of course there's no evidence that it works like that. Once you put your finger on the fact that the problem is that people are spiritually weak, then the solution to the problem is they need to be given access to power, and they need to be encouraged to increase their power, and they need to know what is the power source. And there you have a problem, because the secular denies the necessity of the spiritual.
How do you help individuals cross that insurmountable hurdle then?
I think one way is to say that there's a difference between God and religion.
I want to interrupt you there. There will be a number of atheists who will have a deep interest in values, but who will tell you from the onset, I don't do God. How would you engage with such a person?
I think if somebody is an atheist, why are they an atheist? They have reasons for being an atheist. Some people are atheists because, according to the description they have of God, they don't see the need for God, because the natural world operates anyway with or without God. So they say, why you need God? No. So I think that the religions have been able to describe God insufficiently to satisfy what is needed by an atheist in order to believe. A lot of religions operate on the basis of blind faith. And an atheist is somebody who will say, well, I don't do blind faith, which I think would be truer than I don't do God. So once you sort of extract God from religion, which is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I'd say.
And this is why in this series of books we didn't use the word God.
I noticed that you used the word divine in all 8 books. I found that very curious. I'm glad you mentioned it. Do you want to tell us why?
Well, the word God has a lot of connotation. It assumes a sort of old man in the sky, so that assumes the patriarchy.
And a lecturer of mine used to say that word is loaded.
Very loaded.
Yeah.
Some people, they use the word good. They just add another O.
Yeah.
And they get around it that way. What we thought is to use the word the divine because it implies something that's beyond the material world. It implies something that's beyond the human. It implies the possibility of an intelligence, and it also implies something to do with higher power, perfection, something benevolent. And so we said, okay, this word will work for us in this discussion, so we stuck with it.
The last bit reads as follows. The component of meditation is important because your values are affected by the state and condition of your mind, powers of understanding, moral muscle, there's that term again, sensitivities and motivations. Meditation provides the mental and intellectual environment to improve them all. I have to ask you this at this juncture. Are there individuals who cannot meditate, who will not be able to meditate despite their attempts to do so?
I've come across quite a few, yes.
Okay, so what becomes of them then?
You know, what you can do is you can remove the word meditation and use the word think.
Okay. Are there any synonyms for think in this context?
If you think about what you are as a non-physical being of light, anyway, that's meditation. But a lot of people, they maybe have had exposure to certain methods of meditation, and then when they do that, they find they can't do that for one reason or another. But if you tell a person, okay, it's just think about what God means to you, what that word means to you, what the concept means to you. Do you like it, not like it? If you do, why? If you don't, why? And just the fact of analyzing something which is non-material, you know, in some dictionaries, that is meditation. My definition of meditation is sometimes to think deeply about what's worth thinking about. It also means communing with God, communing with truth. There's a lot of different ways, but meditation is not a mental ritual.
It's not?
No.
But you have to be committed to it. You've got to do it daily.
Well, it's very good if you're committed. It's very good if you do it daily, but you have to do something different every day.
So it's not to bore yourself to death, I suppose.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, people use prayer.
Yeah.
Some people interpret prayer as their conversation with God, which is as varied as their conversation to themselves or their conversation with an important friend. Some people, they repeat ready-made prayers, and they call that praying. Some people use mantras. Some people say, okay, we're going to just go into silence, and they kind of close down the mind. And there's all these various different ways that come under the term meditation. And a person who wants to bring meditation into their development of values, they have to think, okay, now, how am I going to meditate? And they have to look at all possible ways and decide what's going to work for them.
Given the fact that meditation is such a personal journey, it's an internal journey, how do you know whether you're succeeding in your meditation? What is the yardstick that you use to measure the success of your meditation and your spiritual progress?
You know, the kind of meditation that I do is called Raj Yoga. And Raj Yoga involves a study. That study comes in words, just like this course. And one of the ways that you can meditate is you can meditate on sentences that strike you. Like you have said a few times, oh, I read this sentence 3 or 4 times. And that means you're working with it in your mind, in your intellect. That is meditation.
Okay.
And if you want to meditate on God, then you have to figure out, what do you mean by God? And then you'll say, well, I don't know. And then you have to just, you know, in a sense, struggle and be prepared to struggle and figure out what meaning you're going to assign to certain words. And if you say about a word, I don't know, you know what we say, Google it. Find out, you know. And what I like about Raj Yoga is there's a vast amount of information about meditation. And you study that, you're going to be able to extract instructions and approaches, and you're going to have to put together all of those things in a subjective way and work with it. And in that way you build your meditation. So what I have found is each and every person who meditates according to the system of Raj Yoga, they all meditate differently.
So it is very individual then?
It's very subjective, very individual, and every day you're going to meditate differently because you're going to meditate on different things for different reasons, and you're going to try out different thoughts and thought patterns and thought processes. So there's a lot of experimentation involved. And as you move through with it, you become more skilled at it.
I thank Sister Denise. The reason that I am enjoying this so much is because in every lesson I've learned something. And I've studied this text before I got here to prepare for all of you. And in every lesson I learn something, and it's so beautiful to grow spiritually in this way. If you like growing and learning, I would invite you to join us for future lessons. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. Take care and goodbye.